The Zarkeli Empire's flagship emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, its crystalline structure refracting starlight in patterns that had struck fear into 1,000 civilizations. Supreme Commander Valthex stood on the command deck, his iridescent scales shifting from deep purple to gold, a sign of supreme confidence among his species. For 50,000 years, the Zarkeli had ruled the galaxy's eastern spiral, their technological superiority unchallenged, their wisdom considered absolute. The massive viewscreen before him displayed Earth, a seemingly unremarkable blue planet that had recently begun broadcasting primitive radio signals into space. The Zarkeli had intercepted these transmissions, dismissed them as the fumbling attempts of yet another emerging species, and nearly forgotten about this backwater world entirely. But then something changed. Supreme Commander, his chief scientist, Ren Zara, approached with unusual hesitation. "Our long-range scans are peculiar." Valthex's secondary eyes narrowed, a gesture of mild annoyance. "Explain." "The humans appear to be in their early space age. Crude chemical rockets, basic orbital stations, primitive satellite networks. But," Ren Zara's scales flickered with uncertainty, "there are energy signatures we cannot explain. Quantum fluctuations that shouldn't exist in a civilization at this stage of development." Valthex dismissed the concern with a graceful wave of his primary arm. "Anomalies. Natural phenomena. We've seen countless worlds like this one." Scientist. "They all follow the same pattern of evolution we documented millennia ago. But deep in the shadows of Earth's moon, in a facility unknown even to most of humanity, General Sarah Chen stood before a holographic display of the approaching Zarkeli fleet. Around her, the quantum computers of the United Earth Defense Force hummed quietly, processing data at speeds that would have seemed impossible just 20 years ago. "They took the bait," she said softly, her dark eyes reflecting the blue glow of the tactical displays. "Operation Looking Glass is proceeding exactly as predicted." Dr. James Martinez, the architect of humanity's quantum masking technology, nodded beside her. "The surface deception is holding. All they can see are our decoy installations, the chemical rockets, the primitive satellites, everything that tells them exactly what they expect to see." For 30 years, humanity had prepared for this moment. When the first quantum sensors detected the Zarkeli probe ships at the edge of the solar system, Earth's leaders made a decisive choice. Rather than announce their true capabilities, they would present an image of technological inferiority. Every visible sign of human space activity was carefully crafted to appear primitive, while their actual achievements remained hidden behind quantum veils of their own design. In underground bases across the planet, pilots suited up in neural interface chambers, connecting their minds directly to ships that existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously. In orbital shipyards phased just slightly out of normal spacetime, the final touches were being added to vessels that could rewrite the laws of physics as the Zarkeli understood them. "Their arrogance is their weakness," Chen observed, watching the alien fleet spread out in a standard conquest formation. "They've grown so accustomed to their superiority that they've forgotten how to truly observe, to question their own assumptions." Martinez smiled grimly. "Humanity's greatest advantage has always been our ability to appear weak when we are strong. The Zarkeli don't just think we're primitive, they're certain of it. And certainty." He paused, watching as the alien ships moved exactly where the quantum predictions had suggested they would. "Certainty is a cage of their own making." In high orbit, Valthex prepared to deliver the same speech his species had given to countless civilizations before. The words were ancient, practiced, a ceremony of submission that had been refined over millennia. His fleet of 1,000 ships, each capable of reducing a continent to ash, arranged themselves in a display of overwhelming force. But in the quantum-shifted spaces between reality and possibility, 5,000 human vessels waited in configurations that would have broken the minds of their would-be conquerors. They were ships that didn't simply use technology. They were technology that had evolved alongside their human pilots, learning, adapting, becoming something that the rigid hierarchies of the Zarkali could never have imagined. "Send the standard greeting," Valthex commanded, his scales now shimmering with the deep gold of absolute certainty. "Inform these humans of their new place in the eternal order of the Zarkali Empire." In her command center, General Chen received the alien transmission and allowed herself a small smile. "Humanity has waited a long time for this moment," she said quietly. "Let's show them exactly who they're dealing with." The trap was set. The Zarkali, in their pride, had walked right into it. And in the next few moments, they would learn a lesson that humanity had learned long ago. True power lies not in the strength you show, but in the strength you choose to hide. Valthex's message echoed through Earth's communication channels, a masterpiece of calculated intimidation refined over thousands of years. The Zarkali transmission painted a picture of benevolent conquest, of primitive species lifted from their barbaric origins into the light of true civilization. As the message played, Valthex observed Earth's crude satellites with his tertiary eyes, expecting the usual panic, the scrambling of primitive defense forces, the desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, there was silence. In the quantum-shifted command center beneath the lunar surface, General Chen watched the final words of the Zarkali ultimatum fade from the holographic display. Around her, the assembled military leaders of Earth remained perfectly still, their faces illuminated by the soft blue glow of quantum interfaces. They had rehearsed this moment for decades, running millions of simulations, preparing for every possible scenario. "They expect us to respond immediately," Chen said, her voice calm. "Their historical records show that every species they've encountered has either surrendered or launched a futile resistance within moments of receiving their message." She turned to the assembled leaders. "Let's show them something new." Aboard the Zarkali flagship, uncertainty began to creep into the command center. Minutes stretched into hours, and still, Earth remained silent. The primitive satellites continued their predictable orbits. The basic radio transmissions continued their mundane chatter, but there was no response to the Empire's grand pronouncement. Supreme Commander Renzera approached, his scales now shifting through shades of anxiety. "This is unprecedented. Our records show no instance of a species simply ignoring the Imperial Declaration." Valthex's primary hands clenched slightly. "Scan again. They must be preparing some kind of response." Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a facility that existed in 4 different quantum states simultaneously, Dr. Martinez supervised the final calibration of humanity's first reveal. "Quantum entanglement networks are synchronized," he reported through the neural interface. "All ships are ready to transition on your mark, General." Chen nodded, feeling the familiar connection to the quantum battle network that linked every human defender. This was not the crude radio communication the Zarkali could detect. It was instantaneous, untraceable, operating on principles the aliens had never even theorized. "Begin Phase 1, she commanded. At first, the change was subtle. Across Earth's orbit, the primitive satellites began to shift. Not in their physical positions, those remained exactly where the Zarkali expected them to be, but in their quantum signature. One by one, they revealed their true nature, not simple communication relays, but nodes in a vast quantum network that encompassed the entire solar system. On the Zarkali flagship, alarms began to sound. Supreme Commander Renzera's scales had gone pale. The quantum fluctuations, they're increasing exponentially. The pattern, it's impossible. It suggests coordination on a scale that... Valthex leaned forward, his confidence finally shaken. "Show me." The main display shifted, showing a cascade of energy signatures spreading across the solar system. Where moments before there had been only scattered anomalies, now there was clear evidence of an organized quantum field, one that operated on principles that contradicted everything the Zarkali knew about technological progression. "This can't be right," Renzera whispered. "According to every model of civilization advancement we've documented, they shouldn't even understand quantum mechanics at this level, let alone be able to manipulate it on this scale. In the Lunar Command Center, Chen watched the Zarkeli fleet's formation tighten defensively. "They're starting to realize," she said. "Dr. Martinez, proceed with Phase 2. The quantum field suddenly pulsed, and in an instant, every piece of Zarkeli scanning technology simply stopped. Not damaged or destroyed. They simply ceased to provide any meaningful data, as if reality itself had decided to stop making sense. Valthex stood, his scales now cycling through colors of alarm and confusion. "What is this? How are they blocking our scanners?" "They're not blocking them, Supreme Commander." Renzera's voice was barely a whisper. "Our scanners are working perfectly, but what they're showing us, it's as if space itself is being rewritten around us." That's when the first human ships began to appear. Not with the flash of deceleration or the roar of engines, but with a subtle shift in reality. Where empty space had been moments before, vessels now existed. Ships that seemed to flicker between states of being, their hulls composed of materials that shouldn't exist, their very presence a contradiction of known physics. In the Lunar Command Center, Chen allowed herself a small smile. "Send our response now." The message that reached the Zarkeli flagship was short, transmitted not through primitive radio waves, but through the quantum network that had rendered their scanning technology useless. "The eternal order of the galaxy is about to change. We suggest you watch carefully." Valthex, Supreme Commander of the most powerful empire in known space, felt something he had never experienced in his centuries of life: doubt. As more human ships phased into existence around his fleet, each one demonstrating technology that should have been impossible, he realized that every assumption, every certainty about humanity's primitive nature, had been carefully crafted to lead to this moment. They hadn't been watching a primitive species develop. They had been watching a master strategist set up aboard. The Zarkeli fleet's formation tightened further, their crystalline ships forming the impenetrable defensive pattern that had withstood the tests of millennia. Valthex watched the human vessels with all three sets of eyes, his scales now cycling through shades of deep crimson, the color of combat readiness. Despite his unease, he still commanded the most powerful fleet in known space. Each of his ships carried weapons that could shatter planets, defenses that had never been breached. "Battle positions," he commanded. "Show these humans the price of defiance." In the Lunar Command Center, General Chen observed the Zarkeli formation through the quantum network's multidimensional display. "Classic Type 7 defensive configuration," she noted, "exactly as the simulations predicted. Dr. Martinez, initiate the Mobius protocol." The first shot of the battle was never fired. It was calculated. Human ships didn't launch weapons. They launched mathematics. Quantum algorithms rippled through space, not attacking the Zarkeli ships directly, but altering the underlying fabric of reality around them. The aliens' perfect formation suddenly found itself existing in spaces that shouldn't have been possible, their carefully planned defensive positions becoming their greatest vulnerability. "Supreme Commander," Renzera's scales had gone white with terror. "Our ships. The space between them is wrong." Valthex gripped his command podium as reality seemed to fold in on itself. Ships that had been kilometers apart now existed simultaneously at multiple points in space. The formation that had been the pride of the Empire for 50,000 years had become a quantum paradox. "Impossible," he breathed. "No species has ever. This violates every law of physics we know." "That's precisely the point," Dr. Martinez said in the Lunar Command Center, his fingers dancing across quantum interfaces. "They've built their entire civilization on their understanding of physical laws. We built ours on finding ways to transcend them." The human fleet moved with impossible grace, their ships sliding through dimensions that shouldn't have existed. They didn't fire conventional weapons. They didn't need to. Each vessel was a nexus of quantum manipulation, creating spaces where Zarkeli technology simply couldn't function as designed. Aboard the alien flagship, chaos erupted as systems began to fail in ways that defied explanation. Weapons charged but found their energy dispersed across multiple quantum states. Shields maintained their integrity but protected spaces where their ships no longer fully existed. Launch the Worldbreakers. Valthex commanded, his voice heavy with desperate authority. The Zarkeli fleet's most powerful weapons, enormous crystal matrices capable of tearing apart the atomic structure of entire planets, began to power up. General Chen's expression remained calm as she watched the energy signatures build. They're reacting exactly as expected. Execute Operation Paradox. The human response came not from their ships, but from space itself. Thousands of quantum gates opened simultaneously, each one linking to a different possibility, a different timeline. The Worldbreaker's energy didn't fire into normal space. It fired into an infinite recursion of quantum reflections, each blast becoming weaker as it spread across countless dimensions. "What manner of demons are these humans?" a Zarkeli officer whispered, watching as their mightiest weapons dissipated into quantum foam. The truth was both simpler and more terrifying. Humanity had spent decades preparing not just weapons and shields, but an entirely new form of warfare. While the Zarkeli had perfected the art of combat in three-dimensional space, humans had learned to treat reality itself as a weapon and a defense simultaneously. Dr. Martinez's voice was steady as he reported, quantum field saturation at optimal levels. Ready for Phase 3. Chen nodded, feeling the neural interface harmonize with her thoughts. Begin the symphony. What happened next would be debated in Zarkeli war colleges for centuries to come. The human fleet began to move in patterns that seemed random but carried deep mathematical significance. Each ship's position formed part of a vast quantum equation, a problem so complex that trying to solve it would drive the aliens' tactical computers into recursive loops. Valthex watched in horror as his fleet's coordination began to break down. Ships attempting to target human vessels found themselves solving impossible equations, their targeting computers trapped in mathematical paradoxes. The perfect order of Zarkeli combat doctrine dissolved into chaos. "We have to retreat," Renzera pleaded. "Supreme Commander, we're not fighting ships. We're fighting an entirely new form of existence." But retreat wasn't simple. The human fleet had woven a quantum web through the very fabric of local space-time. Conventional faster-than-light travel would be suicide. The hyperspace corridors were now quantum superpositions, existing in multiple states simultaneously. In the Lunar Command Center, Chen watched the Zarkeli fleet's desperate attempts to maintain cohesion. "They still don't understand," she said softly. "They think this is about defeating them. It's not." She paused, watching as another section of the alien fleet became hopelessly entangled in quantum paradox. "It's about showing them that everything they thought they knew about warfare, about physics, about reality itself, it was just the beginning." The battle wasn't fought with fury or desperation. It was fought with elegant mathematical precision. Humanity wasn't trying to destroy the Zarkeli. They were teaching them a lesson about the dangers of assuming that technological advancement followed a predictable path. Each quantum manipulation, each impossible maneuver, was another line in that lesson. Valthex stood motionless on his command deck, watching as centuries of military doctrine crumbled before him. The proud crystalline ships of the Zarkeli fleet, each one a testament to millennia of technological evolution, drifted in confused clusters through space that no longer behaved according to any laws they understood. His scales had settled into a dull gray, the color of profound uncertainty, a shade rarely seen among his species. In the Lunar Command Center, General Chen studied the emotional readings from the quantum sensors. "Their neural patterns are shifting," she reported. "The collective psyche of their fleet is experiencing something their species hasn't felt in 50,000 years. Existential doubt." Dr. Martinez nodded, his fingers moving across the quantum interface. "That's the true power of our approach. We're not just defeating their ships, we're dismantling their entire worldview." The Zarkeli had built their empire on absolute certainty, Their technology, their tactics, their very understanding of the universe had been refined to perfection over millennia. But now they faced an enemy that didn't just challenge their military might, it challenged the very foundations of their reality. Supreme Commander, Ren Zera approached, his movements hesitant. Our analysis systems, they're showing something disturbing. The humans, they're not using technology as we understand it. They're not following any known principles of scientific progression. It's as if they what? Valthex demanded, his voice carrying an edge of desperation. As if they evolved along a completely different path of understanding. One that we, in our certainty, never even considered possible. Throughout the Zarkeli fleet, similar revelations were spreading. Ships' crews watched as their most basic assumptions about physics were casually violated. Weapons officers stared at targeting displays that showed objects existing in multiple states simultaneously. The ordered universe they had dominated for so long had suddenly become fluid, unpredictable, alive with possibilities they had never imagined. Chen activated a direct quantum link to the Zarkeli flagship, her voice reaching them not through conventional communications, but through the fabric of space-time itself. Your empire is built on the assumption that technological progress follows a linear path. That younger species must develop as you did, must think as you do. She paused, letting the words sink in. But humanity chose a different path. We looked at the laws of physics not as absolute rules, but as suggestions waiting to be rewritten. The impact of her words rippled through the alien fleet. In the quantum realm that humanity had learned to manipulate, fear and uncertainty spread like waves through the collective consciousness of the Zarkeli crews. Ships began to break formation, not in tactical retreat, but in psychological rout. "They're running," Ren Zera whispered, watching as the outer edges of the fleet began to drift away from the main formation. But Valthex knew better. "They can't run," he said, his voice hollow. "These humans haven't just trapped our ships, they've trapped our understanding. Every attempt to retreat would require us to trust in principles of physics that no longer seem to apply." In the Lunar Command Center, Dr. Martinez monitored the quantum field fluctuations. "Their ships are starting to experience cognitive dissonance at a structural level," he reported. "The quantum uncertainty is beginning to affect their crystalline technology directly. Their ships are literally struggling to maintain their own reality." Chen nodded grimly. "Show them the final truth." At her command, the human fleet began a new maneuver. Instead of attacking or defending, they simply shifted. Each vessel seemed to occupy multiple points in space-time simultaneously, creating a visual demonstration of quantum superposition on a massive scale. To the Zarkeli observers, it appeared as if reality itself was acknowledging human supremacy over the laws of physics. "Impossible," Valthex breathed, watching as his mighty fleet was reduced to a collection of confused observers. "All our knowledge, all our advancement, were we simply walking a single path while these humans explored the entire forest?" The revelation hit the Zarkeli collective consciousness like a physical blow. Their certainty, the foundation of their imperial might, had been based on a fundamental misconception. They hadn't achieved the pinnacle of technological advancement. They had merely perfected one possible approach to understanding the universe. Throughout the fleet, crew members began to report strange phenomena. The crystalline structures of their ships, technology that had evolved over thousands of years, began to resonate with uncertainty. It was as if the materials themselves were questioning their place in reality. "We never prepared for this," Ren Zera said, his scales now showing the deep blue of profound realization. "All our defenses, all our weapons, they were designed to fight enemies who played by the same rules we did. But these humans, they're not playing the game. They've changed the nature of the game itself." In the Lunar Command Center, Chen watched as the mighty Zarkeli fleet began to dissolve into chaos. Not from weapons fire or tactical superiority, but from the sheer psychological impact of confronting a civilization that had fundamentally surpassed them in ways they had never imagined possible. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "the most effective weapon isn't the one that destroys your enemy's ships. It's the one that destroys their certainty. The vast darkness of space had become a canvas of quantum possibilities around the Zarkeli fleet. Valthex watched as his empire's mighty armada, the culmination of 50,000 years of technological evolution, hung suspended in a reality they no longer understood. His flagship's crystalline structure resonated with an unfamiliar frequency, the vibration of uncertainty. In the Lunar Command Center, General Chen and Dr. Martinez exchanged glances. The quantum readings showed exactly what they had predicted: the complete psychological collapse of an empire that had never learned to question its own assumptions. Their entire civilization is built on crystalline technology, Martinez observed, studying the data streams. Beautiful, perfect, unchanging. But that's their fundamental weakness. They chose perfection over adaptation. Chen nodded, her neural interface humming with the collective consciousness of Earth's quantum fleet. Send the final message. The words materialized directly in the minds of every Zarkeli crew member, transmitted through the quantum field that now permeated the space around their ships. Your empire was built on the assumption that you had reached the apex of possibility. We are here to show you how much further you could have gone. As if to demonstrate this truth, the human fleet began its final maneuver. Ships didn't just move, they evolved, their forms shifting and adapting in real time, each vessel becoming a living demonstration of humanity's core strength, the ability to change, to grow, to transcend limitations. Supreme Commander, Renzera's voice cracked with emotion, his scales shifting through colors never before seen in their species. They're offering us something. Not surrender, not destruction, but enlightenment. Valthex stood silent, all three sets of eyes fixed on the impossible display before him. The humans weren't just defeating them, they were teaching them. Each quantum manipulation, each violation of what the Zarkeli had thought were immutable laws, was a lesson in the price of arrogance. In the Lunar Command Center, Chen initiated the final phase of humanity's response. Show them the bridge, she commanded. The space between the two fleets suddenly crystallized into something new, not quite reality, not quite quantum possibility. It was a demonstration of what the Zarkeli could achieve if they abandoned their rigid adherence to what they thought they knew. Your empire doesn't have to end. Chen's voice resonated through the quantum field. It just has to evolve. Look at what you could become. The bridge showed them visions of possibilities. Zarkeli ships that didn't just harness quantum mechanics but danced with them. Crystalline technology that didn't just maintain perfection but grew and adapted. It was everything their civilization could have been if they hadn't stopped questioning, hadn't stopped searching for new ways to understand the universe. Valthex felt something shift deep within his consciousness. The color of his scales began to change, not cycling through known patterns but creating new ones. We thought we were the teachers, he said softly. We thought our role was to guide younger species toward our level of advancement. But we were trapped by our own success, frozen in a single moment of evolution, while the universe continued to offer new possibilities. Throughout the Zarkeli fleet, a transformation began. The crystalline ships, responding to their crew's collective realization, started to resonate with new frequencies. They weren't breaking down, they were breaking through, discovering potentials that had always existed within their structure but had never been explored. They're ready, Martins reported, watching the quantum readings. Their ships, their technology, their entire civilization. It's all beginning to shift out of stasis. Chen stood, feeling the weight of the moment through her neural interface. Then let's complete their education. The human fleet began to power down their quantum field manipulators, not in victory or surrender, but in invitation. As the fields collapsed, they left behind something new, a framework for understanding the universe that merged the Zarkeli's crystalline perfection with humanity's quantum adaptability. We offer you partnership, Chen's voice carried across the quantum bridge. Not submission, not dominance, but true collaboration. Your empire has spent 50,000 years perfecting one path. Let us show you how to explore countless others. Valthex stepped forward, his scales now shimmering with colors that represented emotions his species had never before experienced. In 50,000 years of expansion, he said, his voice carrying to every ship in both fleets, this is the first time we have encountered a species that could truly teach us something new. The response rippled through both fleets, not as a surrender, not as a victory, but as an awakening. The Zarkeli Empire had arrived expecting to find another primitive civilization to absorb into their unchanging order. Instead, they had found partners who could help them break free from the crystalline prison of their own perfection. As the quantum field stabilized into new configurations that neither species had imagined possible before this moment, Chen smiled. Humanity's greatest strength was never our technology, she said. It was our understanding that true power lies not in achieving perfection, but in never stopping our search for something better. The stars looked down on a scene unprecedented in galactic history. Two civilizations, one ancient and one young, beginning a journey that would reshape their understanding of what was possible. The Zarkeli had arrived as conquerors and would depart as students. Humanity had prepared for war, but had achieved something far greater. They had sparked an evolution that would echo across the galaxy for millennia to come.